good to go.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. I'll call the meeting to order today of our special budget discussion. Is there any declaration of interest related to any item on today's budget or today's agenda? Not hearing any. Madam Clerk, would you take the roll call, please?
Certainly. Councillor Mackey.
Present.
You, Councillor Carlton.
Present.
Councillor McQueen. Okay, Councillor Patterson.
Present.
Councillor Keaveney.
Present.
Councillor Body. Warden Milne.
Present.
Councillor Borneo.
Present.
Councillor Eccles.
Counted for.
Councillor McKay. Councillor Dobreen.
Present.
Councillor Gregg.
Present.
Councillor Dickert.
Present.
Councillor Nielsen.
Present.
Councillor Matrosovs.
Present.
Councillor Kentner.
Present.
Councillor Pringle sends his regrets. Councillor Hutchinson.
Present.
Confirm we have all members in attendance with the exception of McQueen and Body. However, I will just do a check of the list and make sure. And I expect they will be joining momentarily.
Okay, thank you, Tara. Councillor Mackey, I see you have your hand up.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Just received a phone call from Councillor McKay, and he is having difficulty with logging on. So I'm just wondering if Sarah could maybe give him a call and provide some assistance to him.
We can certainly reach out.
The link that he's got, he's telling me that it says has expired. So other than that, I can't help you.
We can certainly reach out to try to connect him. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, Six Nations of the Grand River, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, Wyandot, Wyandotte peoples on whose traditional territories we gather and whose ancestors signed treaties with our ancestors. We recognize also the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. So in regards, just before we begin, in regards to the confusion around the meeting materials, does anyone wish Tara to go through what happened and why? Or does everybody understand? Everybody has the materials, I presume now. Does anyone not have the materials? Okay, good. Well, I think we're good then, Tara. So we'll move on then to the reason why we're here is the pre-budget workshop for 2024. Kim or Mary Lou, who's taking us through that?
Thanks, Mr. Warden. And yes, Mary Lou will now move into the presentation for everyone. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Kim. Mary Lou, do you want questions as they arise, or would you prefer everyone to keep their questions until we come to a natural break in the agenda?
I'm open to whatever works best for people.
Okay.
I would
right.
suggest that going through the slides as far as like the immediate reductions and level 1, 2, 3, that kind of makes sense that we could stay to those.
Okay.
But if somebody has a question when I refer to what's on the second document, which was the spreadsheet, I'm more than happy to stop and we can discuss at any point.
Very good. Okay.
Okay, so here we go. All right. You should be able to now see my screen.
Yep, I can.
Okay, So I'll start with the PowerPoint presentation. So last week on Monday, we were sitting at just shy of a $10 million increase before growth. And that was reduced to 8.4 million after growth, which was a 12.12% increase. There's been some slight adjustments with growth since we last met. As of October 31st, the growth was, after growth became $8,411,436, which is a reduction of $20,842. And just as a note of caution, of course, the final return roll from MPAC will not be received until the middle of December. So that number can slightly change between now and then. And a 1% increase totals approximately $695,600. So the purpose of today's meeting, since our meeting on October 24th, senior management reviewed budgets and provided a list of expenditures to review with you today that are levy funded and not required by legislation. So to recap, we have some potential reductions to budgeted expenditures that we'd like to discuss with you and obtain your thoughts on any recommendations that you make for reductions. If there's something you require further information, background analysis on today's information, and just to talk about the next steps prior to preparing the draft budget package that will be published for December 1st for our first meeting on December 8th. So the changes are listed in order of increasing impact to the public and or the county. And so I'll speak to the slide and then I'm going to toggle to the spreadsheet. So staff have identified reductions of $836,400. And this is accomplished through the use of one-time funding. And these are for items that are truly one-time in nature. Reducing transfer to reserve, where we've looked at the reserves and the operational requirements. And this can be done without impacting that department's operations. And any positions that staff had recommended as part of the budget development that would be new or additional hours, and that's removing those positions. Now I'm just going to flip to this one. I'll start up here. So to fund the corporate cost of leap year from one-time funding, I mentioned this last week, it's about $195,000. There is a communications ask for website engagement platform and a $15,000 that we would fund from one-time funding. And that's a tool to help build and interact with the public on Gray.ca to get their feedback on opinions on projects, services, and decisions. There's an overlap for 2 leaves in finance that we could fund from one time. That's $19,500. And fund year-end assistance in HR from one-time funding of $14,300. So the total of those 4 items would be a net reduction of $243,800. There's some line item adjustments that have been made. HR can reduce their furniture budget by $2,500. Transfer to reserve for future capital projects, a reduction of $20,000. We've looked at the IT reserve transfer. We could reduce it by $25,000. There was a transfer to reserve budgeted for Sydenham that we can reduce by $100,000. And reducing the Grey Roots transfer to reserve, and that was intended for future builds, a reduction of $123,000. Additional planning fee revenue, so that increases our revenue by $50,000. And there's TVs and hardware for paramedic services bases for communication purposes of $5,300. We would fund that from reserve, and those total line item reductions are $325,800. Then there's the removal of positions and added hours that were recommended by staff for the 2024 budget. If we reduce and remove the admin support that was to be shared by IT and communications, 61,600. There was an additional business analyst position for IT that was requested. It was in the budget for 83,100. A half an FTE for custodial at Sydenham campus of 39,100. And a Grey Roots program assistant for $53,000. And as well, there was an increased request for maintenance hours at Grey Gables of $30,000. And so those first four positions, they were not in the budget for a full year. They were phased in starts. So the total of all those reduction of new or added hours comes to 266,800. And so the total of the one-time funding, the line item adjustments, and the removal of new or additional hours reduces the budget by $836,400. And that's an approximate 1.2% reduction to the levy. And I'll pause there to ask if there's any questions or comments.
So I can't see everybody. So if somebody has a question, please speak up. Oh, now I see everybody. Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Warden. Wondering if you can help me understand the premise for the transfer to reserve for Sydenham campus. Was there a goal or a vision that was in place that the money was being built up to do some future expansion of it? Or was the transfer to the reserve on Sydenham campus just more of a safety net cushion for the building?
For you, Mr. Warden.
Yep.
So for Councillor Nielsen, this wasn't to expand the building. It's for life cycle improvements. So based on a building condition assessment, we've determined that if we reduce the reserve, there could be years that it is in a negative balance, but overall, the corporate reserves will be sufficient.
Okay. Any other please use your hand or your digital hand, so to speak. That way I can keep them in order. I don't see any more. Okay, Mary Lou, you want to carry on with the next adjustments, I guess? Or potential adjustments?
Okay. So staff is recommending that the changes I've listed now, that they be incorporated in the budget.
Counselor McKay.
You're not,
Oh,
Maybe I'm-
sorry, Councillor McKay.
Mackie.
Mackie.
Sorry.
That was Kim's fault. She
I'm
led
so
me into that one.
I'm so sorry.
See how easy that is? It just happens. Sorry, Scott. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm just wondering, Mr. Warden, if council wants to recommend these changes now that have been requested by staff. I'm certainly prepared to move that we support those recommended changes, but I'm not sure how you're wanting to go through all this.
Is there? Well, yeah, let's do that. If you want to put that motion on the floor, we can do that. So, Madam Clerk, the motion would read something to the effect that I guess the one-time
that's fair.
funding reductions, is that how you would phrase that, Councillor Mackie?
For all of the level 1 impacts. if you
No,
can-
those are
No,
next.
no,
No.
no.
Those are next.
Sorry,
No,
okay.
the adjustments that have been or are being recommended to be funded through one-time funding.
Okay.
Yeah, the adjustments made in the presentation for the November 3rd meeting and the staff recommendation that was just provided to us, that is what I am recommending we proceed with and give authorization to change in the budget.
Okay, to incorporate, yeah. Is there a seconder for that motion? Again, I can't see everybody, so,
you have three people's hands up, Mr. Warden.
okay,
Councillor Dobreen, Councillor Carlton, now there's four, Counselor Eccles and
Counselor
Counselor
DeBreen, if you'll second that, that'd be wonderful. Any discussion on that motion? Maybe Mary Lou, if you could, or
Sorry.
whoever's,
Mr. Warden?
just a second, whoever's controlling the power. There we go. Thank you very much. Okay, Counselor DeBreen, are you seconding the motion?
Certainly, I'll second it, but I did have a question.
Okay, that's
actually.
good. I'll give you the floor now. I just wanted to be sure we had a seconder. So thank you. Go ahead, Counselor DeBreen.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and good afternoon. I did want to just clarify, the recommendation is to use the one-time funding, but Mary Lou also included the removal of new 2024 positions. And I wanted to know, one, is that part of that recommendation to move forward? And my question to Mary Lou or to other staff is, what risk are we entering into by not providing those additional positions? Thank you.
Who would like to deal with that one?
I can speak, Mr. Warden.
Okay, please, Kim.
So first of all, I understood that what Counselor Mackey was proposing was that all of the pre-meeting reductions, that total 836,400 or 1.2%, those were the reductions that we were approving at this time. And if I have got that wrong, please do let me know. Second of all, with regard to any risk with new 2024 positions, there's always challenges that, staff think carefully before we ask for new positions. We know that that's an expense and a challenge for everyone. We determined that much of this work would simply need to be either foregone. In the case of a business analyst, we simply wouldn't be able to move forward with projects in IT if we don't have the staff. And others would require, other staff potentially to work overtime or in other ways to try and juggle to make sure that we're meeting requirements.
Follow up.
Sure.
Thank you, through you, Warden, to Kim. And that is one of my biggest concerns is, foregoing work, provided, it wasn't necessarily something that it was been nice to have, but the increased workload for staff that may already be overburdened is something that we need to consider as far as morale and health, wellness. And so I do have a concern with some of that, but I will defer to staff's recommendation and hope that we can find a way to ensure that training and staffing are protected.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Carlton.
You're on mute, Sue.
Sorry, Sue, you're muted.
Sorry,
There you go.
I took the hand down, not the mute off. Thank you, Mr. Warden. I guess I have a concern with voting on pieces of this without having seen the whole thing together in one go. I think there may be pieces of this we might come back and say, not putting funds into reserves now is going to have a big impact down the road. Somewhere we have to catch up on that. So I think I'd sooner look at the whole thing at the end and not vote on it piecemeal all the way through. And so that's just my opinion. Thank you.
And certainly what is being proposed to be voted on here right now is what will be included in the draft budget presented on December 8th. There will still be opportunity to make adjustments beyond that, of course. And if we need to make those changes then, as you described just now, we can still do that. The purpose, as I understand it today, is to simply give staff some direction as to what to include in the draft budget for presentation on December 8th. So if there's something in particular that you think, in hindsight, needs to either come out or go back in, we can still have that conversation December 8th and beyond. Okay? All right, so the motion in front of us is to at this point adopt the reduction, the total reductions prior to today's meeting, which is 836,400. Is that correct, Mary Lou? That's the right
That
number.
is correct, yes.
That's the correct number. And is that your intent, Councillor Mackey?
Yes, that's my intent, Mr. Ward.
Okay, very good. All right. Councillor Hutchison, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. It's more of a, so I'm very clear on this. So if these are removed, as we're discussing right now at the motion,
Yep.
how are they going to be brought forward, or how will we have the opportunity to review them on December the 8th? Because they'll actually be, they won't be brought forward, they'll be eliminated. That's my understanding. So
They will be
voting on now, and I just want clarity for
correct.
what,
They will
from
be
our mind.
eliminated.
Thank you.
They will be eliminated as far as the draft budget is concerned, which is presented or will be presented on December 8th. But at that point, if further changes are needed, if you want to put something back in or take more out, you still will have that opportunity on December 8th and beyond. I think, I forget the date of the next meetings, but on December 8th is when the full draft budget, as staff anticipated, will be presented.
Okay, just to follow up, Mr. Warden, I just
Yep,
like
go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Okay, but so we're actually going to have to bring this sheet on the side ourselves because it will not be in front of us. That's, I think, is what my concern is. If they're not in front of us and we wanted to identify one like Councillor Carlton,
Yep.
Carlton has said, it won't be in front of us, and we're going to have to actually bring it back. And I think that's where Sue was going with it. And I just so I'm clear on it as well. Thank you.
Well, I don't want to suggest that this is going to be a simple process because it's going to be intense. I see Kim's hand up.
Perhaps Mary Lou and I were going to say the same thing, but certainly what we can do when we get into those budget deliberation days is ensure that all of the previous reductions, we have those listed and available and an opportunity to revisit those as they pertain to individual departments or the budget as a whole, so that we can have one last check. Is that what you're going to say, Mary Lou, or am I misspeaking there?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay, good.
Does that satisfy your concern, Councillor Hutchison? Yeah, I see the thumbs up. Good. All right. So any further discussion on what has been proposed here right now? Is anyone opposed to that motion? Not seeing any opposition, I'll declare that carried. So carry on, Mary Lou, please.
Okay. So the level 1 reductions. So, when we prioritize these and we met as senior management and looked at where everything fit, the commonalities with level 1, they're mostly internally focused. Clients or service levels, people really wouldn't see a difference externally. Some will negatively impact the morale, the staff development, and the potential for future operations. And things like staff training and wellness budgets would likely have the greatest negative impact on the county. So I'll just give a little bit of a context. So what's in level 1, level 2, and level 3, we're bringing these forward because we've been asked to come back and say what is not legislatively required. So in no way are we saying that, these are the things that you should do. We have just brought these merely for your consideration and for us to have a discussion as to what your thoughts are. And now I'm just going to flip and I'll bring up the level 1 discussions. So there's things such as I'll say that these things have been many of them are long-standing items supported by prior councils, or perhaps even this council last year. And then there's a few things that have been relatively new in nature, and we'll identify anything that is that was new to the 2024 budget. So it's been a long practice that there's long service awards, and they start at 10 years and up. What's included in the current draft budget are long service awards that total about $15,000 across the entire corporation. With council, if we eliminated senior management from the catering, from the lunches, that would reduce about $6,000. There's currently in corporate management training $100,000, and that's across the entire corporation, and we do offer that up to member municipalities as well, as if we had added space. That 100,000 does things like crucial conversation training, supervisor training. I'd say things that are all important when we recruit new people, and in knowing how to manage people appropriately. If we reduce that and do what's legislated and only do health and safety training, we could reduce that budget by $90,000. So we would leave 10,000 in it. Departmental budgeted training. We would need to do a deeper dive and look, because some is mandatory and required, such as long-term care, paramedic services. They have base hospital recertification, so mandatory training. Transportation does winter and spring training with their teams. Some has been mentioned if it's professional development and job offers. So that was something a little more than we could tackle to turn around in less than a week, and wanted your thoughts on that. The 2023 wellness budget corporately was $25,000. There's been a request to increase it by $5,000. We could hold it at the $25,000. We could reduce it completely by $30,000. There's the staff recognition event that was held at Grey Roots. It was a $21,000 budget in 2023, an ask of $30,000 in 2024. So again, it could be flatlined or it could be eliminated completely. Mileage, if we reduced training and conferences, that would provide a similar reduction in mileage. We also have included, it's a change in how we would calculate our mileage. Currently, it's based on a number of calculations, and we update it quarterly. We would move to the CRA rate, which I know some of our local municipalities also use. And that rate would come out in January. And for 2023, it's approximately 62 cents a kilometer. The one thing we're finding is the people that drive every day when mileage rates have been high are negatively impacted by our rates, which were 50 cents roughly. We can look at reducing conferences for staff, whether that's reducing, eliminating, or only looking at virtual options. One of the other things we looked at is said we could explore cell phones where we would no longer purchase hardware, and we could move people as their hardware expired to a bring your own device program. That would be something we would need a policy on, and to work with IT to determine the impact of it. It wouldn't eliminate corporate cell phones completely. There are some that we would be required to have. And I'll use the example of, say, the duty supervisors for paramedic services, community paramedics, some in long-term care, et cetera. So the ones that had a price beside them, if the full reduction was made, that's a reduction of $171,000. I move on a bit further. If we look at the council budget, there's a number of items. If you eliminated the warden's banquet, if we reduced conferences to one per person, that would also reduce the travel and meals. If we looked at the removal of the warden's forum and inaugural, and if we reduced our number of memberships and we gave the value of FCM, in total, that's $65,000. For climate change, there's a transfer to reserve budgeted for future work. That would remove $12,000. Finance, at some point in the near future, we're going to need to do a software refresh for our financial software. It's been in use since 2001 with, regular upgrades. And at some point, it's no longer going to be used. And we will require something more advanced. So currently, there's no money in reserve for this purchase. Healthcare initiatives. It's the policy says 0.75%, which is 509,500. With the commitment made to Bright Shores, we need at least 200,000. That commitment was started in 2023. We paid that out of the reserve. There's roughly 209,000 left in that reserve. And then for council's consideration, this is something we haven't spoke about, is the growing need our partners have for food, and whether that's OSHARE, Salvation Army. Some of it would support the SOS program. So if we had 509,500 that the policy says we would put in reserve, and we know we need at least 200,000 for the contributions for Bright Shores, and say we wanted to leave 100,000 for our community partners for food, that would be a reduction of 209,500. The health unit increase, if we mitigated that using Safe Restart funding for 50% of the mitigation, that would reduce the impact on 2024 by 158,000. So the total corporate services reduction potentially could be $635,500. Planning community development. 2023 was the first year of our partnership with Gray Sauble, trying to reduce buckthorn from the county forests. As part of the levy reduction strategy for 2023, we funded that $70,000 from one-time funding. We could either do that again, or we could eliminate this from the budget. The Forestry Stewardship Council, if we discontinue participation, that would be $7,800. So for planning community development, that would be a reduction of $77,800. Housing. We have the new 14th Street supportive housing build. It was in the budget that we would need to borrow $1,475,000. And that was based on 20 years at 5%. We could pay that fully from the one-time funding reserve, and that would eliminate a mortgage, debenture, and principal payment of $112,700. And then paramedic services, if they replace the tablets that are in the computers and the docking stations with iPads, that reduces the transfer to reserve of $11,000. Transportation was looking to increase their equipment reserve contribution. If they were planning to add a bucket truck, they would need to add the increase to the transfer to reserve by $52,900. Without that, they'll continue using tree service. They were looking at an additional skid steer. If they don't purchase that, it would be a reduction of $23,200 in a transfer to reserve. And if they remove the EV reserve increase of $15,400, that will be a reduction to transportation services of $91,500. So the total level one adjustments that we've identified are just under $1.1 million. And I'll stop screen sharing. Get my screen back. There we go.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Questions regarding level one adjustments, potential adjustments. Councillor Nielsen.
Thank you, Warden. Just a comment first and then an actual question.
Okay.
When we look at the first portion of the level one adjustments, the general corporate costs, a lot of those have to do with staff improvements, succession planning, training of staff, education, improvements on staff. I want us to make sure that we understand that when we look at staff, we know that it is not just the dollar amount that attracts staff to an organization. It is staff atmosphere, how staff are treated internally, having training, having the long service awards, having money put aside so that staff are taken care of, helps us to recruit staff, keep staff, and promote staff from within rather than constantly having a headhunting. And I want to make sure that council keeps that in mind as we just have this discussion, because it's important. We see staff challenges across the board, not just in municipal sector, but across all sectors. And for Grey County to continue to hire and find and retain qualified staff, this is how we do it. It is this section here that we're potentially considering today that has a great impact on that. An actual question that I have for Mary Lou stems from two different things. There's a few different comments here on using the Safe Restart funding. One question is how much of this funding is left, and two, what is the deadline on using the Safe Restart funding? My understanding that is like the COVID restart funding. So is there a deadline to when that funds need to be used by, and where do we sit after some of these reductions?
Thank you, Dane. Mary Lou.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Warden. Safe Restart, we haven't reported on it now. It'll be, I think, 2 years. I think the ministry just said, here's the money. We're done asking what you're doing with it. And to answer your question, right now, the way the budget is developed, we would be sitting at over $300,000 left at the end of 2024 if there's no other asks. And what we've asked our team is to just go through everything and say, if there's anything else we can use that money for, and just get that wrapped up.
Okay.
One
Councillor
last-
DeBryn. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dane.
One last follow-up. Is this the same question on the one-time funding? There's a few different mentions of that in here. I'm just wondering how much is left in there and what is the reduction once we calculate all the comments here today?
For you, Mr. Warden, based on what is estimated at this point, at the end of 2024, we would be sitting with $4.5 million. And
Okay.
that's within our target balance.
Okay.
And
thank
that's
you.
after paying off the 14th Street housing building.
Very good. Thank you, Mary Lou. Councillor DeBryn, your hand was up. Was your
My-
question answered?
No, my apologies, Mr. Warden. I'm not sure what's wrong with my screen, but I'll have to change the color of my hand, I think. I wondered if CAO Wingrove wanted to, her hand came up while Mary Lou was speaking, and I'd happily listen to what Kim might have to say, might answer my question.
Okay, Kim?
Thank you. I just wanted, Mary Lou, would you remind council how money comes to be in the one-time funding reserve? I think maybe that's something we just need a refresher on. Thanks.
Perfect. So some of it is through corporate surplus. So anything in the corporate services reserve that's surplus. So if our investment income is above target, and that's how we get money in that one-time funding or a tax stabilization reserve. And also for the budget purposes, anything above, I'd have to look up the amount. I don't have it off the top of my head. Anything over above certain amount goes to the one-time funding reserve. And we do that for a reason. So right now, interest rates are high so that it would send more money to the reserve that we have available to use. If interest rates plummet, you don't want to be putting too much against your levy, because then you end up with a budget impact in the current year, and then you have a budget impact in the future year. I hope that helps to further explain, Kim.
Yes, thank you.
So, Councillor DeBryn, your hand is up now. Do you have a question or no?
Yes, Mr. Warden.
Okay, go ahead.
So there was a number of things that came to mind through you. with regard to the wellness budget and staff recognition, it says the 2023 budget of 25,000 and 21,000 respectively was to increase 5,000 and 9,000, but now you're taking them entirely out of the budget. And I'm just wondering, what if it just remained status quo? We'd only be reducing it by 14,000, correct?
Mary Lou?
That's my
Good.
one question.
Through you, Mr. Warden. Because they are not required by legislation, we listed the full amounts.
I see. Moving on, if I may,
Yep.
Mr. Warden, with regard to council conferences, it indicates a reduction of 12,000 if we reduced from 2 conferences each to 1 conference each. I know what Southgate's conference budget just came in at, and not everyone was going or taking advantage of all of our conference policy. And it certainly, if we were to have reduced it by half, it would be significantly more. We only have 7 people on, or 5 people who are on, don't have the ability to go to county conferences. I'm just wondering how the $12,000 was arrived at when there are so many counselors around the horseshoe. And then I suppose my biggest concern is reducing, as Councillor Nielsen spoke so well about, the attraction and retention of employees is far more than just wages. It is a full package of feeling of belonging, of feeling valued, and that value extends to wanting to see them succeed in their profession or develop within their profession. I had this problem last year, and I would look to ways of retaining the training, the recognition for employees, if at all possible. So I know that was a fair amount, Mr. Warden. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to clarify.
Okay. Mary Lou, do you have any response to that, or you're good for now?
I see Tara has her hand up. I wonder if perhaps she was going to speak to the.
Tara, did you want to respond to
council.
that particular question?
Sure, I can speak to the conference
Okay.
line, and that it's kind of an estimate based on what the average registration would be for a conference. So the conference line only, the money allocated to that line is registration fees. So there would certainly be extra expenses with accommodation, meals, and travel that would come from a different line. So we just roughly took $12,000, thinking the average registration fee would be about $1,000 across 18 counselors attending 1 conference per year.
Well,
Sure, go ahead.
thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Tara. That actually clarified a fair amount. So in addition to the 12,000, if we were to forego the 2 conference entitlement, if we want to call it that, there would be additional savings in accommodations, mileage, and meals that in some cases, the hotel is more than the conference registration.
Correct.
And that has not been factored in. If I look at the chart, it hasn't, or has it somewhere? I guess it has 7,000.
Yes, it was factored in at an approximate cost of $7,000.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Kim, did you want to chime in on those particular issues, or is your hand up for a different reason?
I'm sorry. No, it's not. It shouldn't be there. I apologize.
No, that's okay. Councillor Matrosovs, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, a couple of questions that I had marked here in this section. I would like to, if there could be some clarification then with the staff recognition line and the long service awards. So obviously the long service awards are are for a specific purpose, but in terms of the employee experience, when they start here, currently there is recognition along the way, and then there is this above and beyond. If I could please have some clarification about what goes into those two different buckets, and then I will have a follow-up question.
Okay,
Jen
Very-
Moreau.
sorry,
Jen Moreau.
Jen, go ahead. Jern, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Councillor
Yep.
Matrosovs, the long service gifts are literally gifts that they pick from a catalog, and they're based on year increments. So a 10-year increment, a 15-year increment, and the value goes up in the years of service. So our longest serving staff member was 45 years that we recognized this year. For the staff recognition, that's an annual staff event where we essentially throw a party at Grey Roots. We provide lunch to all staff that are able to attend. For those that are on shift that day, we provide lunch at either the bases, the depots, or the long-term care home. The service awards are given out that day, and we have entertainment. It's just a celebration of careers and activities that we've done in the previous year. The warden attends and can speak to that event. Was that all you asked, just about the service awards and the staff recognition, Councillor Matrosovs? Did I cover it for you?
Yes, thank you. That was
Okay.
that answers my first question. Thank you.
Just
Um,
before
so-
just before you go to your second question, Councillor Matrosovs,
Yes.
I do want to speak to the staff recognition day, and as Jen pointed out, the warden does attend that and helps hand out the long service awards. I don't want to put too much of a point on it, but that event is extremely well received by the staff. It was a wonderful, I'd never been to it before, but it was a wonderful event. The staff mix and mingle. They probably see people there that they would never have seen before. In some instances, certainly I saw staff there and chatted with staff that I'd never had an opportunity to meet before. And it was, as Councillor DeBreen pointed out, it is probably worth, I don't know what it is worth in terms of dollars and cents to the staff, because it's probably worth way more than what is on that sheet of paper. So I mean, I can't speak too much to that event, but it is very valuable. So anyway,
Oh.
with that, Councillor Matrosovs, your second question.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that clarification, because for those of us that are not allowed to attend that, it's illuminating to hear what goes behind that and its value. It's both its numeric value as well as its qualitative value. Thank you.
Yep.
And given that relationship question, my second question is and it seems like a small number when we're looking at big picture items here, but the council day catering to eliminate SMT. One of the highlights of and I'm assuming this refers to when we meet at council afterwards, we gather and we have lunch together. And I think it's a crucial and a valuable opportunity to be able to sit with SMT at that time, as well as council colleagues. And so my question is what is the other cost part of council day catering? What would be the council members total? Because quite frankly, if we were to eliminate one, I would rather eliminate both and bring my own lunch and still sit down with my council colleagues and be able to sit down with SMT at the same time. To me, that would be more valuable than the actual catering cost. So that would be my question on that one. What is the other figure that isn't shown in terms of council day catering?
Good question. Mary Lou, she's looking.
Mr. Warden, I think Tara has that number.
Oh, Tara, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Tara.
sorry, I could do a quick calculation here if I just have a moment. We look at usually estimate of council catering in a year would be between $9,000 and $10,000.
Okay, thank you. And I will look forward. I'll leave it, Warden Milne, because I don't want to ask too many questions, but I'll I would look forward to seeing a breakdown on the memberships consideration. There's one example of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, but I know that that's the only mechanism in which a municipality can actually reach the federal government. They will only speak to the Federation, and that is how we can, rather than having to go through the provinces. So that's a key one. So I'd like to know what the other memberships are, and I would like to hear what other upper tiers do. Are we an anomaly? Are we standing out that we belong as a county to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and other upper tiers don't? I would like to hear that comparison when that kind of information is available. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mary Lou, or was somebody going to respond to that, or is that okay for now?
I can add that
Kim?
Council, Grey County is a member not only of AMO and FCM, but Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. I don't think, as far as OGRA or OSUM, I don't know if we have a fee to belong to those, and Mary Lou shaking her head, no, we don't. So there are a number of things. In my estimation, I think most counties are members of those organizations, either Eastern or Western Caucus and the others that I mentioned earlier. So I don't believe that we're an anomaly at all. It's just there are a number of memberships, and you know, if council so chose, you would still have the ability to attend annual conferences. You would be doing so as a non-member likely, and your registration fee would be increased compared to what you're paying now.
Right. Okay. Councillor Greg.
Thank you. And through you, Warden, just a couple comments, perhaps a question or two. I certainly am a big believer in the value of those long service awards. We are as good as the individuals that work with us. So I am a big supporter there. The wellness budget and the staff recognition, I'd actually like to see, but I would like to see those froze at the same denominations as last year. I guess the 25 and 21,000 that was in the budget last year. And a question on the council day catering. But before I get to that, if I'm a proponent of keeping certain things in the budget, then I have to work diligently somewhere else to remove further or offset if I can. Noting that even working off the last budget document that we had a week ago, from 2020 to 2024, the after growth levy increase was approximately 30% for people. So one line item that I would be comfortable with making only $200,000 is the council commitment to Bright Shores over the next several years. That's the item under healthcare initiatives. 0.75% is $595,000. I would be comfortable in moving that to $200,000, and that difference is largely going to offset maintaining the long service awards, the corporate management training, the wellness budget, and staff recognition budgets at the status quo of 23. My two questions are the corporate management training, the reduction of 90,000. My question is, what was the spend, or what was the budget for 2023 again? And the council day catering, what would be the impact if council considered 1 or 2 virtual council meetings through the year in terms of offsetting that? The savings, I would presume there's mileage charges that go back through the corporation for many of the members to go to each council meeting, and then there would be the subsequent savings in the catering costs for 1 or 2 meetings. So by such an action there, that would offset the elimination of that line item, because I agree with Andrea. I think there is value in sitting with the senior management and learning on various project status and different initiatives and and so forth. So those are my comments at this time. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Now, I was there a question specifically in there, Scott? Yes, there was. Oh, there's Jen. Okay, Jen, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Warden, to Councillor Gregg, the amount in corporate management training for 2023 was approximately $83,000. The additional $17,000 was for a planned management competency leadership program that we were going to try as a trial. It would offer 30 seats, and we would have offered a number of those seats out to lower tier as well, to see if we all are comfortable with the learning and competencies for our emerging managers and leadership team, which is why it became 100,000 this year proposed.
Very good. Thank you, Jen. Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Good afternoon, everyone. A lot of my points have been covered in the last 2 or 3 speakers, but just a couple of things. Certainly, I agree with continuing to support the long service awards. We did eliminate those in Meaford, and I know staff retiring were disappointed. And I think it's equally important, as others have said, to continue with some form of recognition for staff. In Meaford, we do not a meal, but sort of an hors d'oeuvres, finger foods event where people still have a chance to mingle. And I think that mingling is the important part of that. I did have a question in relation to conferences, which is showing no amount here. If staff are needed to attend a delegation, I'm just wondering how that factors into this particular portion of the budget.
Oh, who wants to take that one? Mary Lou.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. So the conference budget would include if staff attended AMO. It might be, for example, some of my team, my deputy and I attend the Municipal Finance Officers Association. Director McNabb attends like the Ontario Association of Paramedic Chiefs, etc. So there's a wide number of conferences that are listed in that, in addition to anybody that attended AMO, OGRA, etc.
Okay. Kim. Sorry.
And further to that, Councillor Keaveney, your question about staff and delegations, I guess our recent experience has been that delegations have been maybe all in a single day, and perhaps it could be arranged that a staff member who was needed for the delegation could simply attend the conference on a single day rate rather than attending the entire conference, and then you wouldn't have the depending on where it was, I suppose, if it's nearby, they could, in Toronto or whatever, they could go and come back in the same day. That wouldn't work very well for AMO though, because it's a bit too far, but that would be one way of minimizing costs there.
Okay. Councillor DeMarine.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and thank you, Kim. I would hesitate on eliminating the senior staff that attend the conferences where minister delegations are, where we have an opportunity to attend minister delegations. Simply that in the case of, CAO Wingrove, the opportunity to meet with other CAOs and the benefit of the CAO being there with council is tremendous. I appreciate Mary Lou's explanation that the conferences that hasn't got an amount is more reflective of the department heads attending their individual professional association conferences or and I would hesitate to eliminate that. One thing that I would like to ask is that the lower tiers are looking to finalize their own conferences and their own budgets in relation to that. And I know for a fact that Roma has already been booked. So I'm not unsupportive of reducing my attendance at only one conference if that will aid in preserving the staff training. However, it's unfortunate that Rome has already been booked. Thank you.
I see Councillor Bordignon has his hand. Ross, was your comment related to what Councillor DeBreen was just talking about?
No, I think I'm just wanting to, sum up a little bit from my point of view, if I may. Come back to me if you'd like.
All right, I see Councillor Bordignon had his hand up first, so I'll come back to you
Right.
next, Ross.
Thank you.
Councillor Bordignon, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, through you. We need to, I agree with all the other councillors. We're talking about staffing, training, conferences. Those are very important initiatives. Scott, Councillor Gregg's earlier comments in regards to when we were talking about the healthcare initiative, maybe a reduction. I appreciate looking at the $10,000, $15,000 different type of budget lines. They all add up. We have to take into the soft benefits of all those, especially when it comes to staffing and training, things like that. I'd hate to see that eliminated. When we look at the big picture items, and that's where I always get concerned when we commit beyond the means of the reserves or things like that. So I'm all in favor of keeping all the things that we need to do to help with staff, retention, training, recognition, conferences. But let's look at the big picture items where we can retain all those, but by cutting, $200,000, $500,000 items down to $200,000 or $300,000 items. So I just wanted to reiterate Councillor Gregg's comments. I think they're right on track. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Kentner.
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I want to thank staff, and I think we all should, for doing the really heavy lifting so far here. This is a substantive reduction from where we were, and I think we really appreciate it very much. And I think we have to be careful. We can't let it melt away in the area, for example, that affects corporate services, which is us and staff. There's a big chunk of change saved here, and we can't let it melt away because as we move into the levels 1, 2, and 3, it's going to get tougher and tougher to really make any headway. So I just want to say, and I have some comments on a few of them when we get there, but I think there's maybe something to be said for Councillor Gregg's suggestion that maybe even 3 or 4 sessions like this done, online would enable us to, when we are together around the table, break bread and get to know our staff better and to discuss some of our, mutual issues. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. And I don't disagree with you on the meal thing. And the clerk will be not surprised to hear that the warden would be delighted if we could just keep dessert at the very least. But anyway, Councillor Carleton.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I too agree with what Councillor Gregg was saying on everything there. I get the feeling we're looking at pennies is what we're trying to pinch out of this. There are 2 items though that concern me, and that's the climate action or the climate change and the finance transfers to reserve. Those I think are very minimal, and yet moving forward, if we don't have funding in place for future financial software at some point or for climate change as we move forward, it's going to cost us a lot more in the future. And I think we should be continuing to invest in those items. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm conscious of everybody's time. We got a bit ahead of us here yet. So maybe Anne-Marie or Mary Lou rather. Geez, Mary something. Mary Lou. Sorry, if we could carry on to the next level, please.
All right.
Just call me Rick or something like that. I don't know.
That's okay. When I first started, somebody that sat in a neighboring cube consistently called me Mary, and so I started calling him a different name.
Now there's staff appreciation.
That's right. So level 2 reductions, these have a deeper cut. So It would impact our services, the partners that we work with, and potentially our vulnerable residents. And some of this would require changes to bylaws or agreements. And if I scroll down and we start looking at those, we've made a commitment to the Children's Safety Village. If we discontinued that, would be $16,000. There's two climate change projects, so nature-based climate actions and sustainable agriculture for $15,000 and $23,000 respectively, for a total of $38,000. Under planning, if we remove the snow plowing at county-owned parking lots at Markdale and Kolapur and signed those that they won't be maintained in the winter, it would save about $30,000. I know this is a small amount, but if you discontinued the contribution for the Forest Festival, it's about $5,000. The payments for beaver and coyote grants in total between them $30,000, and the contribution to 4-H is $4,000. In total, that's a $69,000 reduction. At Grey Roots, if we remove the archive and collection summer student positions, that's $23,300. You move into Ontario Works. So these are things that we fund for people that aren't our OW clients. So if someone couldn't afford to pay for a funeral, it's $76,200, and seniors dentures $15,000, and that would reduce it by $91,200. Our early on budget does not require a municipal contribution. If we remove that, it's $159,800. And I will say that there is an early on review that's currently underway, and they're expecting the results of that review in December. That money funds not only our own early on, but it funds early on centers that are operated by some of the childcare centers. In the social services budget, these items have been here for quite a while. There are social initiatives. So there's low-income family support for children with unmet needs of $5,000. The YMCA recreation program of $98,300 that assists families that can't afford the registration for sports for their children. The mental health funding we pay through an agency for children of $97,700. We fund United Way 211 program of $19,900. There's the Community Drug and Alcohol Strategy Task Force of $20,000. Same for the Grey Bruce Poverty Task Force and the Bruce Grey Data Information Sharing Collaborative of $5,000. The money we fund Beaver Valley Outreach for recreation, homelessness, the Good Food Box of $9,500, and the contribution we make to Safe and Sound for their rent of $24,000. And as you can see, those all total $299,400. For long-term care, they had requested outdoor contract security. So this is for the parking lots when people are coming out at, say, 11 o'clock at night and getting to their cars, $23,500. If we didn't implement that, there's a suggestion we encourage people to use the buddy system. If we reduce the contract social worker to a minimum funded requirement at Lee Manor, that's the one of the three homes that has a budget in excess of what's provided by the province. That would be a reduction of $13,400. Each of the three homes has a levy-funded daily food per diem for raw food of 68 cents per day. Over the course of the year, across three homes, that's $78,400. And those three items for long-term care would be a reduction of $115,300. In September, you saw the paramedic services review with the ORH recommendations. In total, that requires just under $500,000 to implement the recommendations, and it's a phased-in strategy over 11 years, and phase it in to avoid spikes in the levy. That amount is just shy of $500,000. If we reduce the service level increase for 2024, it's $116,900. Community paramedicine and community paramedicine for long-term care. If we move those so there is no levy requirement, it would be a reduction of $56,200, and that would reduce the service level. So we would reduce hours that CP is available. There was a request to increase peer support. And if we reduced that and left it at the amount in the 2023 budget, it would be a reduction of $11,300. We have more public access DFIBs in the community. There's been an increase in the budget ask of $12,600. If you reduce that to what the 2023 amount was, that would be the reduction. Kevin uses an ORH modeling tool to look at what impact you would have for any service level adjustments and what that does to a response time. If you remove the modeling tool from the budget, that would be a savings of $10,200. Currently, community paramedic staff share stethoscopes. Kevin had asked for an additional $4,000 so that there would be no sharing. And if we reduce the promo on public relations, so we have a first responders week, we provide teddy bears for children at accidents, etc. That would be a reduction of $5,200. If you implemented all those changes, it would be a reduction of $216,400. And so the level 2 adjustments, if everything was implemented, would be a reduction of $1,028,400.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Questions? Councillor Kentner.
My question is, if we took that $78,400 out of the long-term care budget for raw food, does that mean there are no apples or oranges or bananas served in the homes?
Jennifer?
Thank
Good
you. Through you, Warden Milne, to Councillor Kentner. So what it would mean, well, initially the additional per diem was implemented by council to support the purchase of local beef and enhance the quality, the overall quality and experience that the residents have during their meal times. So the impact would be, we wouldn't be able to purchase local beef. We would need to do that through our supplier. It is increasingly difficult to stay on budget. So there would need to be significant effort to stay on budget within what's funded by the province. And then the other, I guess, additional kind of impact, right now we're able to use those funds to support, in addition to local beef, resident requests like corn on the cob in corn on the cob season and local strawberries, asparagus, that kind of thing.
Well, if I may just say that and children's mental health are the two toughest areas as far as I'm concerned, and I hope we can avoid that. I'm not sure where, because we will be looking for other things we can add to the list rather than, because we're going to eliminate some, I'm sure. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and I share Councillor Kentner's thoughts about the children's mental health, $97,700. And I just wonder if we could have a bit more information on where that goes and what impact that might have on the organization.
Anne-Marie, or
yeah, that's me. Yes.
There you are. There you go. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So the children's mental health funding is goes to Keystone, and it's provided for wraparound services. So we fund that funding equates to about a 1.5 FTE staffing, and they provide intensive services, and they go to the geographic area in which that service is required. Many of our families maybe have issues getting access to transportation because of the geographical location. So this provides funding for that services to be happening where it's required. So it helps usually about 60 high-risk unique individuals and their families a year.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Councillor Body.
Thank you. I was just wondering exactly what is nature-based climate actions and what exactly is sustainable agriculture?
Randy?
Yeah.
Or Skull?
So on the nature-based climate, what's being proposed this year? So we've, of course, have the climate change community practice that's has members from each of the local municipalities. So one of the options that we're looking at is to, there's a number of tree planting grant funding programs that are out there that we're looking to try to partner and collaborate on. So some of that funding would be used as seed funding to move forward with tree planting projects, whether it be on county lands or municipally owned lands or in other areas that we could look at potentially partnering and collaborating on. So that 15,000 would have went towards providing some seed funding in support of grant applications that we're looking at in partnership with local municipalities. The sustainable agriculture, Council may recall the experimental acres program that we partnered with Wellington County on. That funding with Wellington County partnership ends this year. So we've been in discussions with Gregg Services to look at how we might be able to continue a similar program using their networks of farmers and supports to be able to move forward with projects in support of looking at partnering with farmers to improve sustainable agricultural practices. With that, there's collection of data, collection of best practices that can be shared through Farmers Week and through other farmers. So that 23,000, most of that would have went to Gregg Services to help support and continue a similar program in partnership with the existing program that the county partners with Wellington County on. So that's what those two initiatives are.
Follow up, isn't sustainable agriculture something that most farmers would be interested in and something the OFA should be doing?
Yeah, so there's a number of initiatives that I think trying to provide some best practices, test out different things like cover crops and ensuring that just as an example of what we're seeing in terms of those projects. So yeah, so it'd be looking at how we can continue to provide services, share best practices, share some seed funding as well to support some of those initiatives, so that we can share some of those best practices with farmers through OFA, through Gregg Services, and through the Farmers Week, and just promoting and creating more awareness around how we can implement some of these sustainable practices, which ones work, which ones maybe weren't as successful. So that's the whole premise around that initiative, that Experimental Acres initiative.
Okay. From my point, I can see keeping the tree planting based climate actions, and I'm less enthusiastic about the sustainable agriculture as we move forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Body. Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Mr. Warden. This is a very difficult process. When I got this information, yesterday, you start going down through it, and we can make really good arguments for everything on this sheet. And some of my colleagues have already made these arguments. What we potentially have approved so far is maybe taking us down from 12% to 10.5%. We got a long way to go, and it's going to be difficult. I don't want to touch anything that has to do with looking after people, but a lot of our dollars are spent looking after people. So, to Councillor Body's point, sustainable agriculture, it's things like that we gotta cut out. Anyways, I can go on and on, but I do have a couple of questions. One was in regards to Ontario Works and funerals. What happens if we're not funding that 76,000. Who looks after these people that have nothing? That's my first question. And second is the YMCA recreation program. What are we actually getting for that money? Thank you.
Good question. Anne Marie?
Thank you. For the funerals, there would be nobody. So it would probably fall, quite honestly, to the local municipality then. I added it on the list because it is not a mandated service for the county to provide, but it is something that we have been traditionally provided in the past. So yes, again, a very difficult one. And for the recreational program, it does go towards a subsidy. It is for recreation, sports, art, music, drama, whatever, swimming lessons, camps, any of those memberships. It is given to families based on income. So there is a sliding scale, and about 150 children receive subsidy. And most of them families are in the 40,000 and below income bracket.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions. Oh, Councillor Mackey.
Sorry, Mr. Ward. I have all sorts of questions if no one else does. I'm sure they do. The outdoor contracted security at Lee Manor, have there been issues, safety issues for our staff? And I think Mary Lou mentioned the possible implementation of a buddy system. I'm sure there's lots of staff that are getting off shift at 11 o'clock. Is there a way to avoid actually having security but keeping our staff safe? Thanks.
Jennifer, maybe you want to speak to
Sure.
that, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Warden. So there have been issues. We have had the contracted security for some time. It's been in place since early pandemic. Some of the issues have been individuals under the influence of drugs or alcohol approaching residents or staff, checking for unlocked cars. There's been some break-ins into the shed and the cars. And you're right, all of the shifts, particularly in the winter, start, end, or both in the dark. Having said that, we can work with, and we are working with the health and safety manager in doing a review of safety, violence in the workplace, safety, I'm not using the right words, but you know what I mean, in trying to support staff in feeling safe when they're coming and going from the home. We also can access the local police just as anyone else can in the community. So there are opportunities to try to use alternatives to security.
Thank you, Jen. Councillor DeBreen, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just to that very last point, I would imagine the police being called for additional security would be added to our bill and probably far exceed any additional security that we might be able to provide. I just wanted to go back to the funeral costs for those who can't afford them, where it may not be mandated as a county expense. Is it mandated at all? Because you mentioned that it might actually go back down, it might become the responsibility of the lower tier municipalities. So we're just passing that back to the municipality. But if it's not mandated at all, I guess it comes down to nobody pays, nobody looks after these people. Thank you.
Yeah, that would never happen. I mean, there would have to be somebody that would pay. If you look at some of the legislation around it, and Michael would probably have a lot better idea about this than I would. But typically, if there is absolutely no one, if it's gone through, then it does end up at the municipality. But as I said, this is something that the county has done, and we have a system in place to do it because we do provide those funeral services for people that are on ODSP or OW that do not have funds. That probably is what would happen. And I really don't have any other answer for that because we have a system in place now. But like I said, it's not mandated, so that's why it's on the list.
Thank you.
Kim?
There is a CPP death benefit that is $2,500, I think, if someone has paid in for at least a third of their working life. But the funeral home, I think, unless there was family to claim it, the funeral home would have to do that, and it takes many weeks to process, etc. So I'm not sure that they would be interested in taking on that responsibility either. This would be a real, just a real change, and we'd have to work with the funeral directors, etc., to really delve into this further, I think. Would you agree, Anne Marie?
I would, and it actually doesn't cover the entire cost either.
Yeah.
Councillor Gregg. Oh, sorry, Councillor DeBreen, are you good? You're good. Okay, Councillor Gregg.
Thanks, Warden. Just a couple quick points. I would be in favor of Scott Mackey, I think his comments were spot on. This is going to be a very difficult process, and it has to be. The $16,000 for Children's Safety Village contribution, it's showing there, but the one reason I made a motion a year ago and it was carried by council, that motion was to remove it from consideration for this whole term of council. So I just think of that when looking back as to the intentions of what council did, I don't think it should be appearing. And when we post this document, I would find what would be helpful would be to post where it says reduce. It would be interesting or informative to have our current budget year allocations for those line items, just to give us as counselors a little bit more context when we review this document. So just making that note, passing that along to staff if they're able to incorporate or capture that when they repost. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Councillor DeBreen.
I too, since Councillor Gregg has mentioned the safety village, my understanding of that resolution was that rather than them coming back year after year asking for a contribution, that we voted to provide them with a contribution for the balance of the term, not eliminate any contribution. Could that be clarified? Thank you.
Sure could be clarified, but it won't be me that does it.
I think if we give clerks a moment,
right, okay,
they'll be able to find that resolution perhaps.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions related to this level? Again, being conscious of the time, we need to keep this rolling. All right, maybe I'll ask, we'll come back to that, but I'll ask Mary Lou to proceed into the next section, please. Is Mary Lou muted by any chance?
Yes, I was.
There we go. All right.
I was just talking to myself. Level 3 is where it becomes more difficult. These reductions have the most significant and long-term impact on our county future service delivery, clients, and partners. And so we would recommend that there be further analysis completed before we would proceed with any of these changes. And if I flip down to those, you can see we've put under level 3, if we remove the funding for gray ag of 69,100, planning would no longer participate in OLT hearings when a development application is appealed. I would save about 20,000. Under level 2, we talked about a reduction in the ORH recommendations. This would eliminate all the recommendations. The affordable housing contribution, you'd remove that completely for a savings of 622,700. And with regard to our infrastructure assets and especially roads and bridges, this would reduce the transfer to reserve $5 million. And those adjustments would get us to a reduction of $2,084,300. And I will stop sharing. See, Tara has her hand up, so she's got the answer on the Children's Safety Village.
Go ahead,
Yes, sir.
Tara, please.
I have the resolution here. So it read that the Council of the County of Gray provide annual funding of $16,000 to the Saugeen Valley Children's Safety Village for the remainder of the current term of council. But I would defer to Mary Lou to confirm that that still does need to be passed in the budget each year.
I would say it does, although I look at it similar to the commitment we made to Bright Shores. Once you've made a commitment and you've passed it, the organization is operating on the premise that they're going to receive the funds. But I'm sure 4-H assumes that we're making a contribution every year. The Children's Water Festival assumes we're making a contribution, etc. No different than Safe and Sound with their rent or any number of the external partners that are impacted in level 2 and then say level 3 with gray ag.
Yeah, I would suggest that motions of that nature certainly give council and the external groups some level of certainty, but no one has a crystal ball to know what the conditions are going to be further down the road. So if changes need to be made, ultimately this council can make those changes, I would suggest.
Correct.
Anyway, Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warden. 2 questions, if I may. I'm wondering about, it was mentioned planning not attending OLT hearings, and I'm just wondering if I could have a bit of clarification on what impacts that might bring to any decisions. And I'm also curious about the affordable housing contribution. I mean, we've been doing that. That was a recommendation of the Affordable Housing Advisory Task Force from the last term, and what impact those funds have made to date, and what is felt about from Anne Marie if the removal, what changes that would make to for planning going forward.
Very good. Scott, I saw him here. There he is. Scott, do you want to speak to that first one, the OLT?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden. Thank you for your question, Councillor Keaveney. So the county already has a policy on when we get involved in OLT hearings and when we don't. So simply put, if you have a municipal application, so a municipal consent application, and a neighbor appeals it, then the county's not at that table. But similarly, if we have a county application, so a plan of subdivision application or a county official plan amendment application, there are certain circumstances under our current policy where the county would be at the table unless otherwise directed by council. So for example, if a non-decision is appealed, then we're at that table. And there's certain other circumstances on development applications where we were. Staff have put this in here because it's not legislatively required. But from a planning staff perspective, and I certainly won't speak for Michael and legal services, but we do think there's risks in choosing to step away from these. Those could be risks to county-owned infrastructure, like our county roads, or they could be risks to our county policy in that regard. So it's something that if council saw merit in, we could look into further and provide further information. But we simply put it up at this time as it is technically a possibility, though maybe not highly advisable, if you will.
Okay, thank you, Scott. And the other question was regarding Anne Marie.
Yes. Thank you. For the Affordable Housing Fund, to date, those funds have gone towards 14th Street and the development or the renovation of 14th Street. We did commit some funds to Lutheran Social Services, who are looking at a build in Owen Sound for seniors. We also are looking at committing some of those funds towards our short-term shelter solutions, looking at some more operating cost-effective ways in which to provide shelter services. It would also impact any future development of Rose Lane, which was in our affordable housing plan, property in Durham, or any other small renovations that we had within our affordable housing plan.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Councillor DeBreen.
Thank you, Warden. And I have a concern about the affordable housing reduction. Province isn't coming to the table. It doesn't seem to help with affordable housing, even though they, put it in our lap many years ago without any increase. We also made a commitment to the health and wellness facility that is currently underway. And not to belabor a point, Mr. Warden, the safety village, the way I read that was that we already paid the 16,000 so that they didn't have to come back to us year over year. I may have misunderstood that resolution entirely. And so I don't know how we can pull that back if we've already committed the funds in 2023, or perhaps that was for 2024.
Mary Lou, do you want to speak to that particular item?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Warden. So for the Children's Safety Village, that's an annual contribution. So it was, the council made the commitment that they would provide that amount a year for the remainder of their term. So
Annually.
that just gave, that's correct. Yes, annually.
Okay.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
Can you clarify, Mary Lou, what it was prior to that? Was it 16,000 per year prior to that, and they had to come and ask every year?
Prior to that, I'd have to look it up. I believe it was Councillor Desai that made the recommendation to increase it and provide an inflation component, because it had been less than that for a number of years. And then there was
I know that it came
COVID
to
where there
us.
wasn't anything.
My apologies.
Sorry.
I know that it was Councillor Gregg that suggested that instead of them coming hat in hand every year, that we commit to an amount for the balance of the term. And my apologies, I just can't recall what the original amount was. I wasn't on council in 2022.
Well, let's let Mary Lou look into that further and get
Thank
some
you.
clarification. Councillor Deckert.
Thank you, Warden Milne. Just for some clarification, in level 3, it says eliminate all enhancements or H recommendations for 372,000, and in level 2, I believe it says 111,000. Is that 372 in addition to the 111, or is that a combined total?
Mary Lou.
So the combined total is just shy of the $500,000. So level 1 would reduce the 2024 impact. And if you went to the level 3, we would eliminate the ORH recommendations completely for the enhanced service enhancement.
Kevin, do you want to speak to that, please?
Yeah, when we looked at these response times, when the WERJ did the review, was to maintain the response times to increasing call volume over the next 10 years and what we'd already faced. And the decision was made to maintain and slightly improve response times. When we were looking at ways of reducing budget impact, there was an initial recommendation to meet the response times in 2022 of adding 252 hours of staffing, which is 3 12-hour vehicles. And then over the next 10 years, it was a total of 8 different 12-hour cars plus some operational support. And just doing some work, and also with the modeling tool, the revised plan would see us moving the upstaff Meaford car to 2027 and keeping the crew for that period of time. It would involve removing the Durham upstaff car, and it would also remove the Holstein base. It would remove a supervisor. It would remove in Craigleith in 2033. It would be removing 5 of 7 days, and we just do weekend upstaffing. And then with these reductions, we'd be able to reduce 4 vehicles out of the plan.
Thank you, Kevin. Warren, are you good with that? Okay. Councillor Matrosovs.
Yeah. 15's good too.
Sorry. Okay.
No, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, the chair. I just want to circle back to it's already been highlighted by my colleagues about the affordable housing contribution. I worry that removing commitment at that level, it is hard enough for us to, on the municipal level, to be able to try to solve the attainable housing missing middle. So to have to change the arrangements that we have going to focus on the affordable housing is quite worrying, because what we do have is working right now. We mentioned the Lutheran housing project, for example. If they can't make a go of it without our contribution, why would we take something that is working out of the mix? We have so much that isn't working that we're still trying to solve on either end of the spectrum, that if we figured out one way that we can work collaboratively to get something done, that's one thing we should keep committed to. I worry about if we don't, then there are fewer affordable housing units, and then what is the implication towards the people who need it, and the kinds of needs they're going to need for us if they find themselves without homes. So on both sides of that affordable housing, the full spectrum, if we take something out of the picture that we have actually been able to solve together with other organizations, I'm deeply worried about that. Thank you.
I agree with you. Any other questions on this particular level? Because we do have an in-camera session to discuss some other possibilities. Councillor Greg.
Thanks. I would just quickly say to the affordable housing contribution, this is something that we will talk further on. The federal government has finally demonstrated what they should have been doing several years ago, and that's coming to the table with funding envelopes to support housing, because it's entirely something that they've dismissed for years, and we should welcome. And also the reduction of the GST is a big consideration that we shouldn't just skip over. It was an unnecessary tax put on the builders several years ago, and it only made sense. So when we talk about partnership builds, there is a consideration that we have to give to the value of that reduction of that 5% on completed units. It's not without impact when you're talking projects of that size. Those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, Mary Lou.
To circle back to Councillor Dobreen's question, prior to the $16,000 contribution for Saugeen Valley Children's Safety, it was $15,000.
Very good. And ironically, I think we may have, Councillor Dobreen may have left the building. I don't see her on this.
Here.
Oh, there you are. Oh, there you are. Okay, sorry.
No, thank you very much, Mary Lou. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Good. Very good. Thank you. I guess just to kind of wrap up this section here, and what irritates me more than anything is that a lot of these items that we're thinking about pulling out of the budget here are items that the province should be looking after. They're social services items that were never intended to be funded by the property tax base. And I guess I could go on at length, but I won't, other than to say I'm really disappointed. I know the province has their own financial issues, as highlighted by the office yesterday. But man, why is the property tax base paying to bury people? It just doesn't make sense to me. Councillor McKay.
Yeah, just to comment on a few things. The burials, it's because we've been doing them for so long. The homelessness, trying to get housing for them, we've been doing it for a long time. The government is not stupid. They sit back, they watch the counties, and they say, oh, County of Grey are looking after this. We don't have to get involved. It'd be interesting to talk to other counties and see what their thoughts are on it's time the province takes back some of these things that they forced down our throat a number of years ago that we've kept going on. It's like the safety village. You know, you should never promise what you're doing a year or two down the road because you never know what's happening. But here we are talking about 16,000 a year for the next 3 years of the term of council to fund this. Like, we have to think about now what we're doing instead of saying, okay, we'll get money for the future, which we don't have. When that we finally found that out. So just my comment kind of irks me. Like Warden Milne says, a lot of the things we do really belong to the province, not us. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Okay, so Councillor Kentner, I'll give you the last word on this section anyway.
Yes, I just, I'm sure other councillors have received a notice of a provincial public meeting at the Bayshore Community Centre so that we can offer our input as citizens on the provincial budget construction. I think we should be there in force to make it very clear that they need to take back some of the things that are swamping the municipal level of government.
Thank you, Ross. And absolutely, the county will be participating in that exercise. Okay, we do have a closed session. So if someone could give me a motion to move into closed session. Councillor DeBreen, seconded by Councillor Eccles. And I thought I had the motion here in front of me, Madam Clerk, but I don't see it now for some reason.
It's okay. I can confirm that the motion is that Committee of the Whole proceed in closed session to deal with personal matters and labor relations or employee negotiations.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion? Anyone opposed to that motion? Thank you. Okay, I'm not sure, Madam Clerk, how we is anyone in attendance that should not be in attendance? I don't think so.
We thought it would be appropriate today for the department heads to remain.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Warden, I think we're good to go.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. We are now back in open session, and I can confirm that we only discussed those items that were listed on the motion to go in camera. So, next steps. As you can see in the agenda, there are the PowerPoint rather there. We've had a really good discussion. Mary Lou, do you wish to make any final comments?
Thank you very much, Mr. Warden. And I know this is a lot of information to absorb in a relatively short meeting. So the next steps would be to action the recommendations from this meeting. We did not action in levels 1, 2, and 3. We had a really good discussion. And I guess I'd look for direction as to how you would like us to proceed. The budgets will be finalized and published on the county website December 1st. We'll have in your calendars for December 8th and 15th, the meetings. That would hopefully by the end of that, we would consider the budget bylaw on January 11th. And we would have a meeting with our tax consultant and we would pass tax policy by March 31st. I can just add to that next week, we've organized tax training with MTE. Peter is coming on site and we've invited our member municipalities as well. So combined with our own staff, we have approximately 17 people attending from your municipalities. And one of the items on the agenda will also be tax policy. So there'll be the consultation with your own teams.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
Mr.
So,
Warden, if I
Kim, go
may.
ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. So we were left with a little bit of homework as staff, and some further analysis. So I'm wondering if, we undertake that. I'm not convinced we can get it done in time for, our next council meeting. But we will put our heads together and decide if that's the case. But either at the next meeting or at another, I think it makes sense to just do it as part of as an add-on to a council meeting. We'll have the follow-up conversation about the items that you asked us to bring back more information about. And then from there, I think the things that we didn't make specific decisions on and you didn't ask for additional information about, we will assume that those will be included in the draft budget, and then council will have the opportunity to make decisions about those things on the 8th or the 15th of December as appropriate. Is that everyone else's understanding?
I think that's where we have to go. If we go back through all this again, we'll be here till, well, it's not dark yet, but it's getting there. So, but I think everybody, we can agree that we're up against a fairly tough budget year, and a lot of work is to come yet, and a lot of discussion, but today's discussion will inform further discussion, I hope. So if that didn't sound too politically round and round, I don't know. Councillor Mackey.
Well, some of it's going around, Mr. Warden. I guess there was a lot of information presented to us today, and there was some really good discussion. But like Mary Lou indicated, we didn't really give direction on a lot of these things. So I'm wondering, and I'm not sure what the next agenda looks like, but I'm just wondering, some of our colleagues today just received the information, and will have a chance to digest it. But would there be time at our next council meeting to go down through each one and have a straw vote and find out where people are sitting in regards to, conferences, and whether we reduce down to one paid conference? It's 20,000 here, 25,000 there, but accumulative, it adds up. And I think we need to take the time to get through some of those things and find out where the majority sits.
Well, and I won't disagree with you. Council meetings are scheduled till 4:30 on the council day, so a lot of times we don't use that time. So perhaps going forward, maybe assume that you're going to be at the county council meeting until mid-afternoon or later, so that we can tackle this stuff in a maybe a more granular level. Kim.
Yeah, so with that direction, if everyone's okay, I'll ask the clerks to put out an amended committee of the whole agenda for next week, and we'll add some budget discussion onto that. As I say, without talking to staff, I can't say that we'll have the additional analysis prepared at that time that you're looking for, but at least it would be a second opportunity to look at some of the things on this list today that you didn't have an opportunity to really weigh in on.
Thank you. Is that sound fair to everybody? Okay. All right. Well, having said that, then I think we've used up most of our time, if not more of it. Does someone want to make a motion that we adjourn? Councillor Nielsen, Councillor Gregg, anyone opposed? We are now adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the weekend. Don't forget to turn your clock back. All right. Take care, all. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.